The Bible describes the first humans walking and talking with God, a single male creator forming life from dust. The narrative then describes the first humans being placed in a garden. And in Genesis 1:31, the text states, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good." At this stage, the narrative presents creation as complete and good.
The exact intention of the creator?
Yes, the story presents it that way.
Yeah.
But the narrative then introduces a major logical problem. It claims God introduced the tree of the knowledge of good and evil into the garden. This raises a serious question, especially when combined with Isaiah 45:7. The text states, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, did all these things." Here is the central question. If God opposes evil, why introduce both evil and a tree associated with its knowledge?
The story becomes even more difficult to reconcile. After the fruit is eaten, the text states, "They are like one of us."
This raises another important question. Who is us? The wording appears to imply two creators rather than one, but we will examine that separately. For now, let's continue with the Adam and Eve narrative. The Bible claims God knows everything.
Okay.
So the outcome would already be known before the temptation occurred. That would mean the outcome was known in advance. That's the first major contradiction. If the outcome is already known, it is no longer a genuine test. And if it is not a genuine test, punishment loses its moral logic. Defenders often say, God gave humans free will. But complete foreknowledge weakens that defense. If beings are created while their actions are already fully known, the responsibility of the Creator does not disappear. Freedom without a meaningful possibility of success is difficult to describe as true freedom. The doctrine known as original sin does not appear in Genesis. The Genesis narrative predates that doctrine by many centuries. The concept of inherited sin developed much later in church theology, around the 4th and 5th centuries CE. It later became widely influential through St. Augustine's theology. The church later formalized the doctrine. That means it was not part of the original Genesis narrative. It appears to function as a theological explanation for earlier narrative problems. Remove Augustine, no inherited guilt, no theological requirement for a savior tied to inherited sin.
So were the writers of Genesis describing Christian theology?
No, Genesis does not describe original sin. It does not describe inherited guilt, and it does not point clearly to a future savior. Those concepts developed later in Christian theology. Some argue God chose not to know what would happen. That removes omniscience, unlimited, infinite, or all-encompassing knowledge. A being that selectively limits knowledge would no longer be fully all-knowing. You cannot defend one divine attribute by removing another. In the narrative, Adam and Eve are not described as being told about inherited sin. There is also no mention of future judgment, inherited guilt, or eternal punishment. That omission matters. If consequences determine morality,
We would expect a loving parent to clearly communicate those consequences to their children.
punishment without full knowledge of consequences conflicts with basic moral reasoning. Within the Genesis narrative, the problem intensifies with the flood story. Humanity is described as inheriting consequences from an earlier event they were not present for. The text then describes widespread destruction. When these elements are examined together, they become difficult to reconcile with the principle of justice. Based on the biblical narrative, doesn't the flood story occur before the Ten Commandments are introduced? Yes. That creates another major contradiction. It would resemble a parent punishing children for violating moral rules that had never been clearly given to them.
So billions of humans would have lived and died before receiving either a moral guide or a savior?
Yes. Savior or universal moral guide were necessary. We would expect that guidance from the beginning.
Yeah.
Instead, the narrative develops gradually over time. That resembles evolving theology, right? More than a complete message communicated clearly from the start. So the problem is not simply human failure. It is a problem within the narrative structure. When examined logically, the Genesis account struggles to align with observable reality, and the contradictions become difficult to reconcile with the idea of perfect divine communication. This series is being built as a long-term exploration, one that follows evidence wherever it leads. If you want to see more of this work, support it by subscribing, liking, and sharing.
Because the more this grows, the further we can take the questions that matter.